Hello, this is Kevin Reeve, N7RXE, with a video on getting your Linksys WRT54G series ready for mesh networking in amateur radio. Alright, so here's the steps we're going to go through to make this work. First thing we're going to do is we're going to find a Linksys WRT54G series that will work. So you need to make sure you find one that meets the specifications, and I'll show you how you do that. You're going to download the firmware for the version of hardware that you have from the website. You're going to install that firmware, and then you're going to log in and set your call sign and a password. And once you save the changes, the device will reboot, and bingo, you'll have a mesh node that you can put into service. It's that simple. Okay? Now, the first thing you need to do is find a Linksys WRT54G series that will actually work with the version of the firmware you're going to upload. Now, if you're watching this video, you've probably already found one, but it's always good to check. So the one I'm going to demonstrate in this video is this one here. This is the label that's on the bottom of these routers. And when you look at it, you'll notice a couple of things here. One is this area right here. Tells you what version you have, and this one shows a version 3.1. We can also use the first 4 digits of the serial number, in this case the CDF9, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go to the hardware guide that's been provided to us on the HSMM-MESH website. And so let me show you that. Okay. So we'll go over here to the website. The website is hsmm-mesh.org, or you can do broadband-hamnet.org, and you'll get to this website. You've got items in the menu on the left, and at the top, at least when I did this video, they have some quick links for us to find the stuff quickly. So you can look at this link right here, supported hardware. When you click on that, you can find this hardware guide to print. And we can use this quick guide right at the top. And it shows us that a WRT54G version 2 through 4 will work for it. Remember, we had a version what? 3.1, so there's no problem there. Or you can take that serial number and in this column here, remember it was a CDF9, come down here and up, there it is. Yep, it'll work. Okay, so it tells us that it'll work. Now in this chart, the ones that will not work are the ones that are in gray. So it's telling us a version 5 or higher will not work. And then you've got, here's the GS series and the GL series. So you can use this guide, and I actually have it on my mobile phone, so that when I'm out and about shopping or come across one or learn of one, I can quickly check to see if it's compatible before I take it. Okay, so that's that step. Then the next thing you need to do is you need to find the installation instructions, and let's go back and I'll show you where those are. If you go let's go back to the home page on the website. You can see the firmware installation instructions. Okay, you'll want to find those, or I'm going to basically follow those in this video. So if you watch this video, you'll do just fine, but just note that there's some great instructions if you'll follow them, and make sure you don't skip some of the steps that are on there that are important. Okay, all right, so that's what we need to do. Okay, now to set up this device, there's 2 ways to do it. You can connect wirelessly from your laptop to the access point, as long as it's been set up and has an SSID. You could do that. Or you can plug into one of these LAN ports that's here at the bottom, the LAN ports. I prefer to plug in. It just makes it a little easier for my part. But you can do this with a wireless connection, and the instructions will tell you how and what happens once you've made it into a mesh and how to access it. Okay? All right. So what we need to do now is pull up a browser. And I'm going to open a new window here, and I'm going to go to 192.168.1.1. That's the default address for these Linksys WAP and routers. Okay, and if I need to, I may need to log in. to it, and I'll need that username and password that I set on it. If you got one from somebody and you don't know the username and password, there is a way to reset it. You basically go to the back of the box. There's a reset button. The instructions I've seen say to hold it in for 30 seconds, or push the button in, power it up, hold it for 30 seconds, and release. And eventually, basically what happens is it'll default back to the default username and password. You can Google that, you'll find it online. Okay, once I'm inside, this is the software on the router, the default one from Linksys. I'm going to go to administration over here on the right. Once I click that, I'm going to go to firmware upgrade. And this is where I'm going to go find and browse for the firmware upgrade. Now, before I do that, I need to have downloaded the firmware. And you can see on this side, if I scroll down, I can find software download here on the left under resources. I want to click on that, and that'll take me to a web page that's going to show me the various the software that I can the firmware that's available, and I have to choose the one that's available for my particular version. Remember, I have a WRT54G. Let's try that again. So, if I look here, there is a WRT54G right there. Okay, and it tells me which one it is for right here, and so I'll click that and download that to my desktop. Now I can go back here and I can click browse, and there is the software right there on my desktop that I downloaded, and I open that, and then I'm going to click this upgrade button. Now it's very important that your router not be disturbed during this, so make sure it's power up good and hope that the power doesn't go out. It'll just take about a minute or less for it to upgrade and put the firmware that's been written by hams to turn this Linksys router into a mesh node. Well, it looks like the upgrade was successful. I got this screen, so that's a good sign. So now we'll just click continue. Now, here's where it can get a little tricky. Now that it shows that it can't find our server, the reason is that we need to, the router has now updated to the mesh node, and it's no longer a 192.168 device to get to it. The mesh node is a 172, and we're going to need our computer that's connected to it to be able to get a new IP address in order to talk to it, so they're on the same network or subnet, if you understand networking. So what you'll need to do is, there's a couple ways to do it, and it depends on the operating system and the computer you're doing it. On a Macintosh, which I am, I can just go to the network settings, find the network, and renew the DCHP lease, and it'll now pull a 192. If you're on a PC or a Mac, you might you'll have to restart your network interface. The other thing you can do is reboot your computer with it plugged in. Some computers are smart enough that if you unplug the networking cable, if you unplug the network cable, you can see on mine it disappeared, and then when I plug it back in, it'll go out and do a DHCP and get an address from the router. So that's another way you can try. But that's one of the trickiest parts, really. Okay, so now that I've got an address, what I can do is go up into the browser window, and I can type local node :8080. All right. And here I am. You can see that my LAN address for the mesh node now, or that router, is 172.27.0.1. And it shows my firmware version and the system time. I've been up for 6 minutes. Please note that once you do install the software, it may take 2 minutes for the first reboot. So don't panic if you can't get into it right away and you can't get an IP address from its server. Just give it a couple of minutes, okay? So the next thing I want to do is do a setup. it's going to ask me for a password, okay? The password is HSMM, as in Hotel Sierra Mike Mike, HSMM. Okay, now you're going to want to give it a call sign. You need to put your call sign in here. It's the node name, but it must also contain your call sign. So my call sign is N7RXE. I can also give it some other information like the name of the node. So I'm going to call it 3 because it's my third node. So N7RXE-3. The other thing I could do is I could put EOC, or I could put command, or I could put hospital, or I could put Mount Logan, you know, if it's located on a mountaintop, or house. You know, you can do whatever you want after this, but just make sure your call sign's in there. I'm going to call it 3 for my node 3. And then you need to give it a password. And so I am going to give it a password. And got to verify my password. Okay. Then I'm going to click Save Changes. And it'll sit here for a second. It's going to reboot. And it's going to come up in about 60 seconds. And when it comes up, I will actually have a node that's on the air. Now, while that's working on that, let me show you something else. Okay. Now, once you've turned this wireless access point router into a mesh node, it changes the way it works. You'll no longer be able to access it from your laptop using the wireless, because in a mesh network, the wireless part, or the antennas, are now being used to talk among nodes. So the way that the nodes communicate with each other is through the wireless antennas. If you want to connect into the node or connect services to the node, you're going to need an Ethernet cable, and you'll use it to plug from your device into the node, like you're from your laptop. And you also, if you want to add services to the mesh network, like you want to put a phone system or a server that serves files or web pages or other things, or you want to put an IP camera or whatever, those all will have to go into the mesh node through a wire in one of the LAN ports on that node. You can read more about configuring those services and devices on the on the node mesh website. All right, let's go back now and let's see if that's done. Okay, it's done. You can see that it's been named. It's N7RXE-3. Now, I will show you one other thing. If you look under your wireless access points that are available to you, you'll notice, let me just let this roll for a second. You'll notice that under, at least on the Macintosh, my Mac, it shows up as a device, HSMM-MESH. I can't connect to it. I can't connect to it because that's the wireless connection. That's the SSID that it's sending out. And let me show you something here in the setup. Okay, I've got to type my password that I changed it to. Now, let me tell you a secret. Write the password on the bottom of your node. Get a piece of tape or a label maker. Put your password on the bottom of the node, and I'd suggest you keep your passwords for all your nodes on the bottom and all the same, so that when you're out deploying them, you can remember it, because you don't want to have to reset the whole thing. Okay, so once I just want to show you one thing. Over here, you'll see that the SSID, this is under the Wi-Fi section, the SSID is HSMM-MESH. Do not change this. I understand in future versions of the firmware that they may be changing what the SSID is, but in order for nodes to talk to each other, they've all got to have the same SSID, and right now this is the standard, or the standard will be whatever's here when you load the firmware. Just don't change it. Okay? All right, that's all there is to it. Good luck. Your node is now available to put on the network and the mesh network, and when it can find other mesh networks, they will show up on this page right here. Oh, under mesh status. Let me go to mesh status. Right here, they'll show you which ones that it can see. Good luck.